Another week goes by of tests and trials and tribulations, another week in fear, another week where we are pushed to our limits. Sending out peace and love to everybody out in the world from here. And one thing I've noticed in the last 2 weeks is that these times of crisis bring out the best and the worst in people. And you probably noticed this about yourself. You've had some amazing moments that maybe even surprised you how resilient you are, and some times of just real weakness where you just wanted to kick yourself, where you didn't behave correctly in front of your friends or your family or your colleagues, and you let something pull you down into a depression or had a fearful moment. And that's okay too, you know, but it's just these times of crisis when we get to see the realness inside of us. And I remember my old martial arts teacher, shout out to Chris Kiston, trained with him for 8 years, and he said, Brian, you learn a lot about yourself when you get into a fight. And I didn't really understand what that meant at the time until we started fighting. And it's true, you find out what you're really about. And a lot of times you're surprised with how resilient you are. And sometimes you're not. Sometimes you're scared and you can't execute and it's a mess. But it's a place and a time to grow. And that's what I'm seeing this week. And I think it reminds me of those Vietnam movies. I don't know if it was Platoon or whatever, where there's the skinny, geeky, introverted, scary guy that gets drafted. And then there's the big, tough, buff-looking alpha male guy. And when you get into a firefight, a lot of times it's the alpha that's hiding in the foxhole, and the skinny kid is out just fucking blasting, right? Giving it to everybody because he comes alive in that situation. And I think a lot of people are experiencing that out there right now.
Dan, it's so nice to see you. But this way that I'm seeing you is, the more that I do this, it becomes increasingly sad.
Yeah. I keep thinking about, you know how like what became called the living room used to be called the parlor, and then they invented funeral parlors, and then they changed the name of the parlor to the living room because the funeral industry wanted to, I guess, supposedly, you know, they wanted to discourage people from having their dead relatives in their house for memorial services and stuff. So culturally, there was this shift that we don't even know or care about, which is that all of a sudden this thing called the living room became a totally normal part of even the tiniest apartment. And I keep thinking during this pandemic about like this is a big enough cultural shift that there could be a permanent thing added to like homes that's like has to do with like a little video station.
Oh, God.
Like everyone will have a little corner with a green screen or just a good lighting, and you know it'll be like the equivalent of like a vanity for a woman's bedroom, or like every home will come kind of equipped with a little video station. Because if not after this time, then definitely after the next pandemic. And what are we learning this time around except we can do this? Like, and I was curious to talk to you because you and your family have a lot more roots in like the conspiracy world, and I haven't had the heart or the savvy to learn about any pandemic conspiracy theories yet.
Okay, well, I'll get to the conspiracy thing, but just what just happened to me during what you just said was deja vu. But it wasn't deja vu like normal deja vu. It was deja vu in the sense that I knew we were gonna have this conversation. I've been looking forward to it, but I've also had this uneasy feeling because I knew that you were gonna present an angle that I hadn't thought of. It was gonna be really, really, really horrible.
Philip, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Cara. It's great to be here. Glad we managed to hook up.
Oh, I know, right? It's been a while that we've been going a little bit back and forth, and then of course the world turned upside down. None of us expected that. I think one of the, I don't know if you could quite call it a benefit, but one of the things that's been happening that I've noticed as a podcaster is that, well, everyone's at home, and so they're ready to record.
Yeah, these crazy times we're living in.
I'm really excited to be talking to you about kind of the concept of your book, Galileo's Error, Foundations for a New Science of Consciousness. This approach has a lot of crossover with the stuff that I've been interested in lately, educationally. Even less so with my scientific kind of communication and my journalistic coverage, but I've gone back to school to work on a PhD in clinical psychology, and my emphasis is actually in existential psychotherapy. So there's a lot of philosophy that feeds into this type of psychology, and of course consciousness, I think, is a really important conversation to be had. That said, I wonder how different our views are about consciousness. So I'm very excited to dig into what you think.
I don't know what is existential. I don't know. Maybe this is not the time to talk about it. Maybe, but I don't. It sounds interesting.
It's really interesting. It's basically just a therapeutic intervention or a therapeutic idea. I guess you could say it. You could say it's a whole kind of theory that's informed by existential views. So instead of taking a more psychoanalytic or a more cognitive behavioral approach to psychotherapy, you take a approach that's all about kind of deeper things like meaning, authenticity, and then there are some views about, like, you know, fears of death and loneliness and finding meaning.
Does that have any connection to what's his name now? Viktor Frankl, logotherapy?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He was definitely one of the kind of, in some ways, what people think of as a founder. And it's interesting because when it comes to existentialism, and I think the reason that I bring this up is because there's some parallels with what we're going to be talking about, panpsychism. When it comes to existentialism, there are a lot of ways you could slice and dice it, but there are two big camps that seem to play nice together. And one is a very secular camp, and that's the camp I'm in, which is kind of a Irvin Yalom camp, that it takes things from a more atheistic approach. And then, of course, there is a more religious camp where you might see like a Kierkegaard, or you might see like a Viktor Frankl, but it's kind of two sides of the same conversation. You know, one of the differences is there is inherent meaning in the world, and it's our job to uncover it. And then my view is that there is no meaning in the world, and it's our job to create it.
A bit of trivia. There's my UK publisher is the same publisher that Viktor Frankl had back in the day.
Oh wow!
Right.
Oh man, that's cool.
This is not my area of expertise, but you know, I have an interest in psychotherapy, and I think it's been in the back of my head actually somehow that, you know, is there sort of a lack of thinking about the meaning of life and finding meaning in existence, and you know, so that's I find that really interesting. I'll investigate further. I'll investigate further. I'll investigate further.
Well, I've got a bunch of stuff. So this is my Marcus Aurelius statue. I bought this when I was writing The Obstacle is the Way. So this is from what I read about it. This statue is from 1840. So I like looking at it and then thinking, like, okay, this literal piece of stone survived through cholera epidemics, smallpox epidemics, polio, the Spanish flu, the flu of the 1950s. So I like thinking about not just like, okay, who are your ideals, but then also how have humans gotten through, like what sort of totems or reminders can you have that like, oh, life goes on. I'm talking to you from my office, and my office was built in 1880, I think. So like this office got through, you know, the Spanish flu, the First World War, the Second World War, you know, the Cold War. And you know what I mean? I think like part of one of the things I think the Stoics would ask us to do is like zoom way out and sort of be reminded that like, hey, as bad as it is, like history does go on. There's no guarantee you and I will be a part of that history, but like, you know what I mean? Like we'll either get through it or we won't.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm curious about the stock market thing, because that's something I was going to ask you, because one of the things I'm dealing with, I think the loss aversion is a big part of it, and it's hard for people to manage. What I'm struggling with is kicking myself. So I wasn't as early as you, but you and I had some conversations, and so I took it seriously. I went and stocked up on food. I cut back on my travel. I basically said like, hey, I'm sort of a buy and hold kind of a guy, and don't have the exposure that you do to some of those stocks. But the thing I said is like, hey, this is going to be bad, but it's not going to be it's not going to be the worst decline in market history. You know, I didn't think that, so I didn't do anything. And so one of the things I'm struggling with is like regret.